Horror comics, once a powerhouse that were crushed by the comics code. Later, a genre ever rebuilding itself, finding a firm niche largely in the indie circuit. These days, there are a lot of horror comics out there, but sometimes it can be difficult to figure out just where to start. So a lot of it can end up coming down to recommendations or those both loved and hated lists. It's very easy to fall prey to titles like the scariest horror comics you need to read, the best horror graphic novels of all time, or my favorite, horror comics you need to read right now. Stop what you're doing, drop everything. Were you picking up your kids? They can wait. Time for recording, we're entering October, aka Spooktober. And even though you can enjoy a good spine tingle all year round, 'tis tradition to seek it out a little bit more in the October month, which is how we find ourselves here with me reviewing Red Mother, which is one of those comics that often finds itself on the scariest modern comics lists. You'll never sleep again or something. The Red Mother never truly achieves that level of terror, and while there are some things about it that are well done, there's also a lot that doesn't work. However, I've seen that some people absolutely adore this comic. I've seen it called a masterpiece. People are always looking for something new to read, potentially. And this might sound like it's up your alley, so I thought I would throw my hat into the ring and tell you about it. Then you can decide for yourself. I'll let you know when the spoilers start. They won't start right away. Also, I read all 12 issues and it can't be for nothing. I need to tell somebody about it. I can't live in a world where I don't talk about it. I mean, I could, but I don't want to. As mentioned, I know some people are going to disagree because it's lauded, so let's do it. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, the channel where we chat all things comics, from comics new and old, to history, to anecdotes, really wherever our whims take us. Today it's horror. The Red Mother is a 12-issue maxi series written by Jeremy Haun, who also does the covers. You may recognize his work from The Beauty, the comic about the STD that made you hot. The Red Mother has art by Danny Luckert. The series also had some nice variants throughout. Number 1 had this very nice Nightmare on Elm Street variant. I also really like number 5's. Look at those otherworldly nails. They would slice through you like a knife. This video is brought to you by Kamikoto. Kamikoto makes great Japanese steel kitchen knives using traditional techniques. They're slick, they're sharp, they come with their own carrying case. They're in a heavy-duty ash box, so you can class up your kitchen, and they make a great gift for your loved ones or yourself. Love yourself. Always love yourself. Each knife is individually inspected and comes with a lifetime guarantee. These Japanese steel knives are used by Michelin star chefs all over the world, so you can roleplay that you're serving your own Michelin level food. Maybe you are. I don't know how well or not you can or can't cook. These knives date back to the Edo period in Japan, and only use steel sourced from mills in Japan. They're authentic and have a good grip, meaning that these knives have a long history, centuries of tradition, and now you can enjoy them in your own home. They feel good in your hand, and that matters. They have a wide range of products to choose from on their site, so you can find knives that best suit your needs or style. Or you can be like me and just use the knife that's closest to you. Kamikoto has several special offers going on right now, and is offering my viewers an extra 50 USD off any purchase with discount code CASUAL50. If this sounds like it's up your alley, then please go to kamikoto.com/casual50. And you can get your Kamikoto Japanese steel knives today. So if you're interested, click the links, I'll have them down below. More than food gets sliced in this comic, that's for sure. The premise of the Red Mother is not overcomplicated, which is to its advantage, as that can be a problem with horror. Sometimes things can get a bit too convoluted. Our protagonist is Daisy McDonough, a very young retiree who has made a fortune after selling off her company, which specialized in puzzles. She's living her best life, eating at bougie restaurants, because her best friend reviews them and she goes with her. She just loves food, and also making life plans with her boyfriend Luke. However, all that changes where early in issue number 1, her and Luke are attacked by something. It rips her eye out of her socket, and he is dragged off into the abyss as her vision fades to red. This will be a common recurring visual theme: her vision made red. All descriptions call it a mugging, but it's not presented that way. That's just what Daisy thinks. But for us, the reader, it clearly is not that. Traumatized, Daisy must now go on with her life. The police are no help. Some even believe Luke attacked her and then fled. She slowly recovers physically and has a prosthetic eye made and begins attending therapy. However, this new eye, while beautifully crafted, is not quite right. At times, it appears that she can see out of it, and everything she sees is red. Along with these blips in vision come violent, dramatic headaches. She also starts to see a dark figure who will come to be known as the Herald. He's taken a break from hanging out at the Spirited Away Hotel. Perplexed, Daisy must try to figure out just what is going on and why her life seems to be unraveling around her. This concludes our spoiler-free portion, so if that sounds interesting to you, you know what to go check out. It's time to bounce. We're gonna go forward with the analysis and details, and for me that means spoilers. You've been warned, and forewarned is forearmed. The Red Mother sets itself up with a slow pace. It is a slow burn horror comic. Each issue, only 1 or 2 truly out of place things occur. It's meant to build an ever-escalating sense of unease. Pacing with horror is extremely important. Bring out the scares too fast and you run the risk of not having built up enough tension or characters or the environment, so there just isn't enough intrigue set up for it to pay off properly. You might get a good jump scare or a startle, but the lasting interest might not be there. But if you bring them out too slow, you run the risk of people's attention wandering or them losing interest. With the Red Mother, these comics came out monthly, and with that in mind, the pacing is quite slow. For even reading it in trade in a chunk, it's still slow. Some find it to be a nice leisurely pace. Others find there's not enough payoff for the amount of setup. One of the things such a slow pace can allow for is for you to spend a lot of time getting to know the protagonist. So by the end of this, you should have a strong sense of who Daisy is, and how she will react to things and why. But even with all the time spent with Daisy, she remains a fairly surface level character. What's happening to her is sad and disturbing, but she never quite makes a connection. She oftentimes makes decisions that just leave one feeling baffled. One of the things that makes her hard to connect to is that we, the reader, are constantly being fed information that Daisy herself is not privy to ahead of her. And as a result, can put you in a place where you're just waiting for her to catch up. She also talks a lot about herself. There's a lot of telling, not showing, so it can feel like reading a cliff notes on her feelings rather than experiencing them. Miles will vary on that though. There's also a lot of shots from her from the side or from the back while she's speaking, which can also visually create a bit of a disconnect. The framing of characters can do a lot to get you to empathize with them. As the plot unfolds, it becomes clear there is a cult, isn't there always, worshipping this Red Mother, and that Daisy is central to it. People in her life have been placed there as guides or manipulators to make sure she's where she needs to be when she needs to be there. And it's quite obvious who these people are just based on how they act. They are not right. And this is even before the story cues you in, which it usually does with some kind of visual marker, usually in red. She can also leave one frustrated, particularly when some of the characters are so sketchy. Her psychiatrist is one of the most leading manipulative practitioners, to the point where I was thinking she better be on it or there is a lawsuit coming. She even follows Daisy to another country on short notice with the excuse that she was just worried about her, so she dropped everything, all of her other patients apparently, and flew on over. And Daisy just rolls with it. Seems legit. She's slightly concerned about it, but nowhere near as much as one should be. That's odd. Daisy is a bit of a blank. After spending 12 issues with her, I still have questions as to what her overall goals and motivations were, as her reactions are pretty much situationally driven and not personality driven. She's sad her boyfriend is missing and presumed dead. She doesn't have to work, so she doesn't know what to do with her time. She doesn't want to talk about what happened to her, but she does want to get over it. And she's skeezed out by the sketchy happenings around her, and she loves puzzles. Her personality is not overly defined, so she's left to react to stimuli provided by the environment or other people. In short, she's a bit of a passive protagonist, which can really work, but when that happens, the environment has to pull more of the weight. This puts the reader in the position of being left to judge her actions, and since the pacing is so slow, you have a lot of time to do that. For example, this false eye that she gets, from when she gets it, is causing her all kinds of problems. She seems to be seeing in red. She thinks she's having hallucinations. So why does she never try taking this false eye out and going around for a few days and seeing if she's still having these hallucinations, which she assumes they are? She just never does. They're horrific to her. She's having crippling headaches. Even just the headaches alone would warrant taking it out for a few days and seeing if it feels better without it. Having something like her taking her prosthetic out and still having these hallucinations and headaches occur could have been a great opportunity to add an element of, is it the eye or is it her? And you could pull a whole, oh, once you wore it, it was part of you, as an explanation at the end if you needed to. There are some unsettling moments and some eerie comic panels, but because of the pacing, they are few and far between. And while some really land, others are hindered by being a bit derivative. This herald design is so reminiscent of many other monsters. And other times, the art doesn't push itself far enough. When Daisy suffers from her episodes where she sees the red world, aside from the herald, everything is the same but the red. And while intellectually you can grasp why that would be disturbing, it doesn't hit that well on the page. It would have been interesting to see if something about the world itself was distorted or off-putting, or became more and more so as the comic went on. Without that, it can feel like she's overreacting at points, particularly when she starts throwing up. This will eventually be in the final issue fully revealed to be because she's seeing into this other world, and the strain of it on her physically is immense. But that's not visually conveyed in a very dynamic manner. It's one of the things where you have to take them and be like, oh yeah, because the headaches in the other world, and kind of put those connections there where the visuals could have done a lot of that work for you. At its core, the Red Mother is a bit of a mystery. Who is the Red Mother and why does she want Daisy? Every issue opens with her becoming more and more humanoid in form, so there's a constant growing escalation or urgency, or there should be. Again, the big moments are very spaced out. You never hit that point where it's just one really horrifying thing after another happening, as if to herald the arrival of Red Mother. So as she becomes more and more defined, the horrific events become more and more. Instead, it maintains that same pace of one or two things per issue. And again, we are always privy to what has happened, at least in the minute details, but not always the big world building ones. So when Daisy's new boyfriend Ian suddenly vanishes after her friend Cordelia is attacked by a seeming madman, there was a real opportunity to build confusion and tension. Why are specifically her boyfriends vanishing? Where is Ian? Was he one of the people who was conspiring against her? But we saw him get killed by the Herald Herald, just as we know that Cordelia is one of the people who is in the cult. So there's no opportunity for you to flex your fan theory or intrigue muscles. So some strong potential sources of tension or unease are left on the table. That gross skin-crawling worry that the people around you aren't who they say they are. Coupling her inability to always see the world as it is with questions about the people in it. Or is she actually seeing the world as it truly is? Ooh, just saying that got some little goosebumps. That's so sad. This is another thing that slow pace can facilitate, a gradually oppressive atmosphere. Just a sense that the world and the horror are closing in on you. But because of the strict adherence to that regular life and scary event, then back to regular life and scary event for the majority of the series, you don't get that escalation. Instead of being on an escalator, you're on a moving walkway. So suspicions don't build on each other, rather they're more like landmarks the one passes by. Speaking of suspicious occurrences that Daisy ignores, or really should have thought more about, we need to talk about the puzzle box. This appears at the end of issue 2. Daisy receives an anonymous package featuring a steampunk-looking heart that is a puzzle box. Now at this point, her attackers have not been found. She's panicked and paranoid because she keeps seeing this herald everywhere. And she's a famous person with potentially unhinged fans because of her company. So there are tons of in-universe reasons why she should be wary, but she just starts solving it. This can also be cause for a rather large meta reaction, depending upon one's familiarity with certain other horror works. For those familiar with Hellraiser or the Hellbound Heart upon which the series is based, you know that you should never solve a puzzle box, only bad things come of it. The other thing is that for those who are familiar with those works, this puzzle box is going to become a huge clue to the plot itself. Because if you see this box and you think even a little bit about Hellraiser 2, that's where this is going. It does go there. Now if one is unfamiliar, this may be an intriguing and unique element, as they do take some time to make the puzzles appear complex and unique. They're still a bit Lamont box puzzly though. Solving the box yields a phone number leading to an eccentric patron looking to put on a revolutionary and interactive art installation, and he needs her puzzle skills. He has these visions and he needs her help bringing them to life. Is she interested? Thanks to the manipulation of her therapist, who is pushing her to try to get out there and has convinced her that her hallucinations are resistance to change, Daisy is primed to accept. This is where the story throws a solid curveball, and there are a couple of these in here, and when they appear they really work. Sadly, none of them amount to anything. But Daisy seemingly kills the Herald, who has been attempting to speak with her by pushing him in front of the subway, and there are some solid panels of her covered in this black ink like blood, and it's a really good visual because as she walks through the throngs of people, it is questionable if they can see it. It's a great representation of how her trauma is clinging to her, and how it is unique to her, as this work will often stop to pontificate on the nature of trauma, in the therapy session scenes in particular. But here, all that's conveyed nicely and cleanly through the visuals. It's a very solid moment, and it does leave you with some questions as to the intent, the purpose of the Herald. He later just returns, resurrected, because he looked cool, they needed him back. It's clear if one's familiar with some horror tropes, not just Hellraiser, that what Daisy is making is not an art exhibit at all, but some kind of hell portal, where they're going, they don't need eyes to see, or only just one at least. The completion of this project is the climax of the series. It's also where the pacing falls apart. While you're leading up to issue 12, it is possible someone will get that nagging feeling that the narrative is running out of time, that there's a lot to wrap up, and in issues 9 and 10 you're still introducing new concepts, like a rival group who are aware of the Red Mother and trying to stop her coming by murdering Daisy. It's issues 9 and 10, there's no time. Also by issue 10, suddenly we've gone from the eyes causing headaches to seeing it bleed once to seeing it go fully red when she sees the other world, which is not matched by an escalation of anything overly horrific on this red plane. It's still just red. It's meant to be because the project is nearing completion. We're getting closer to the Red Mother. But this again is a conclusion that must be drawn intellectually. And once more, it does not take full advantage of the visual nature of the comic book medium. It's a build that would work better in a novel. Daisy in issue 10 also makes the decision to keep the weapon of the man who attacked her, but it's not clear why. She is suspicious, but no more so than she has been for the rest of the series. You never get a really good handle on how Daisy feels. She's just mildly concerned or in pain for most of it. So while it's a good and necessary decision for the plot, it doesn't firmly connect to the overall increase in Daisy's paranoia. She keeps it because she needs to. Issue 11 is the big reveal for Daisy, that all these people in her life were part of this Red Mother cult. They also have her go through her own puzzle that she helped design, which she obviously has no problem solving. And when she gets to the center, they're all already waiting and in robes. So did she have to solve it specifically? Was there a back door and they all just walked around? It's very anticlimactic. Is this just for the extra theatrics? They're going for most dramatic cult? Your heart calls to her, Daisy. Your pain lets her in. But why though? Then they all gouge the same eye as her and are killed by the Herald. For reasons. Sacrifice. Cults. horror. The last issue, number 12, is very big on the exposition because it has to be. All the little details were there, but not the big ones. Who is the Red Mother? What does she want? They do answer those, and they're your standard evil cosmic god, one of them, because there's 4 presented here or talked about. She's seeking to return, destroy, because what else do you do? But the question of why Daisy specifically is left hanging. And for a story that hinged on you following Daisy and caring about her, that's a pretty big gap to leave. Now, not every work needs to answer every question. In fact, some can be stronger for leaving some unanswered. But if you're not going to answer the questions, you need to have a trade-off of some kind, something very compelling. Really interesting characters, or a very strong atmosphere, or the rest of the plot around those questions being very tight. Or you can even set it up so that there's some horror in the question being left unanswered. What if the answer was that Daisy didn't matter? Why Daisy? Why not? But it has already been indicated that it does matter that it's her, so why was she chosen? Luke was taken and fused with the Herald, which again is not surprising. He kept trying to say your name, which once the reveal happens, it leaves you feeling that there could have been more done with that throughout the issues building up to it. Because it's implied that he was fused with the Herald to get to care about Daisy. So it might have been cool to see some of the push and pull of that in the character. Maybe some of the Herald jealously watching Ian. Maybe taking some glee out of murdering him. Maybe one more word, something like mine. Yes, that would make it more obvious that the Herald was Luke, but one could then lean into the question of, was he ever a man, or was he always the Herald? How long was she destined for this? And then we really have no time, so we have to rush through some of the cool things. You gotta run through the body horror elements of eyes being eaten, so that Daisy can stab the Red Mother with the implement she kept, take the eye the Red Mother took back, because empowerment, and then it's over, and she goes on with her life a more confident person, but ever vigilant because the Red Mother. She was so traumatized over the mugging, justifiably so, but almost everyone in her life conspiring against her to bring her to this Red Mother to be used as a vessel, that's fine. She's over that. She has an eye patch now. For her, it was Tuesday. The Red Mother has some cool ideas, but it falls down in the execution. And it suffers from having a focus on revealing the wrong / too many details. A mystery needs to have some elements for the reader to sink their teeth into that they can actually potentially solve, or just leave them with some things to wonder about. It is possible to use the reader knowing more than the protagonist as a source of tension, but that never fully manifests because Daisy learns everything we do, but just later, and there's not really a satisfying payoff to that. So it's simply meant to be a source of overall tension, which for some will land and for others won't. Mileage varies. The bigger questions as they pertain to Daisy and the world are left hanging, so some of the connections are left feeling surface level in nature. Let's take a brief tiny sidebar to compare the puzzle box to Hellraiser's puzzle box, because it's just forefront in my mind. In Hellraiser, the how exactly of the solving and the making of the puzzle are left a bit vague, and yet more of it is made clear. It can be opened with more ease by seekers. Again, the design's placed in the mind by those who are seeking, who are open to it. It functions almost as a beacon for those seeking this horrific mix of pleasure and pain. Seek is the word of this paragraph. It will draw certain people to it, and the results are brutal, which then adds an extra level of tragedy to those who stumble upon it by accident or who don't know what they're solving. Here, there's not enough focus on the puzzle element for it to develop a sense of wonder or dread. It remains a background detail, but it also feels like it's meant to be a bigger component because of its role in the climax. There's just a general distance to how Daisy is presented, and some will be able to pierce that, others won't. But because of that overall distance, the betrayals that Daisy suffers, they don't hurt, they just happen. Particularly her entire new life in England, because there's no time to react. It's just the climax time and they're all dead. And killing all of them also removes some of the potential dread from that ending. You lose the idea that there could still be more people out there. People spinning the wheels of her life, because we saw them all die and it was never clear how many of them there were, if there were sex. SECTS. The art delivers some strong creepy moments at points, but can also tend towards being static when Daisy is just doing day-to-day things. It's also important to remember that it's a very different experience reading this in a chunk than reading it month to month. Reading month to month, it would have been a year building to that ending. The strongest gap, month to month, was probably 11 to 12, because then you knew stuff was going to go down in 12. Slow burns can be incredibly effective and atmospheric, but only if internally within their established stride they are well paced. Now for some, they love this pace, and they're also a bit quick to dismiss critiques as just people not liking slow burns in general. But that does not have to be the case. One can like slow burns, not like a specific slow burn. Don't try and bundle all criticism into a nice neat ball and throw it away. It doesn't work that way. There are some strong points to this work. I don't know why I gave like preacher finger there. The mystery, while overall poorly executed at points, was enough to hold interest, for me at least. It entered into a I need to know where this is going space. Because there were all these threads and it was interesting to see just how they would connect, and also see if Daisy was ever going to realize that everybody in her life was against her. It did a good job of creating a world where it was clear that Daisy was getting sucked sucked deeper and deeper into this environment, what suffered was the atmosphere and the stakes. The story was cohesive, it was self-contained. The things that happened didn't feel outlandish to the universe itself, it stuck to its own rules. It felt like the ending that it built to was intended. This story in many ways seeks to give you deep insight into Daisy, and to its credit, she is not an unlikable character, and she is someone who there is the potential to feel for. All in all, The Red Mother feels like it would have worked better as a film, where the runtime would necessitate that some of these elements would be crunched, which in this case could be a strength. There are some strong visuals and parallels here and there throughout the work, but sadly they're not implemented as much as they could be. Little subtle things like Daisy's scar bearing the same shape as some of the puzzle solutions, or Ian's heart when placed on the altar and the way the blood curls around the bottom of it, again framing that scar shape. Those moments that speak of this connection she has to the Red Mother that otherwise doesn't fully come across. This for me was a work with a lot of potential, but it was also one where a lot of the legwork to reach those more compelling heights was left to be filled in by the reader. Horror can be a very personal thing. While there are objective measures that can be observed when it comes to achieving a certain tone, pacing, editing, coloring, dialogue, internal logic, aka continuity, and there's more, that's just to name a few, other elements will depend entirely upon the person. Familiarity with the genre and other works, how susceptible they are to horror in general, just that kind of vibe and atmosphere, culture, mindset, past experiences, again just name a few things. All of those can impact whether one finds a work scary or not, whether they find it to be objectively good or bad. So one person's meh can be entirely horrifying to somebody else. It can be why sometimes you'll find yourself in a situation where someone is terrified and you're just not bothered. For me, The Red Mother isn't gonna creep me out or haunt me or make me want to leave a light on somewhere, leave me concerned about the random motions I see out of the corners of my eye. I've had works do that, but those are just my opinions and I want to hear yours. Are you one of the people who loved it? Do you completely disagree with me? If so, let me know why. In a sane manner, please, if possible. What are some of your favorite horror comics or graphic novels? I could use the recommendations. Tell me things down below, and while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye!